Good morning. My name's Ryan. I broadcast on a couple different platforms under the name Parent Dome or We Are John Galt. And I'm doing this broadcast on Periscope. I'm going to record it, but I'm also going to put it up on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is very much like Periscope in that the Silicon Valley enterprises, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, do not want my message to get out. They just throttle it, they filter it. So the things that I say are really not meant for public consumption in the eyes of these big platforms. So just recently, I've gotten some new eyes on Periscope, and I think that's because people are kind of sharing it through private communication, through email, or however, there's a little bit more visibility. In addition to some of my participation on YouTube channels, people are coming over to what they can find on my channel on YouTube, and there's a little bit of communication that's happening through the commenting section. Not too many people are attempting to communicate with me through email or direct message. But I wanted to put this video up on the YouTube channel, and I'm using Periscope to do that. And one of the things that I'm talking about and I'm communicating with people is that there's a lot of criticism on social media about what others do. And I understand that. That's a form of judgment or discernment of kind of looking at other people's activities and how they do things and how they think they should or shouldn't do something or should or shouldn't say something. And I'm saying, let's compare and contrast it based upon what we do. It's very easy to offer judgment on other people's actions, conduct, behavior with that while ignoring our own behavior. And people know me that I kind of insert myself into situations and comments and in threads that offer a different perspective on how we can take our own responsibility as opposed to try to hold others responsible for what they do. So it really comes down to self-knowledge about who we are as opposed to who we claim to be. So I'm going to speak specifically about what is most commonly referred to as First Amendment auditing, or people that insert themselves in the public domain as law-abiding citizens with this underlying message to educate or equip or empower citizens to hold on to their liberty, their constitutional rights, their freedoms, and walk this very tight line in the face of authority, in the face of security guards, in the face of law enforcement, and they go on this line. And there's a lot of judgment about how people do it, how they talk to police and how they talk to security guards, or how they even talk to private citizens. And I'm like, you know what? There's a time and a place to judge how others are doing things, but compare and contrast it to what you're doing. If your only action is based upon a keyboard, well, you don't have a lot of credibility to offer opinion into what somebody else is doing if you're not willing to do it yourself. So I come from the perspective that I need to do things before I earn the credibility or integrity that I can judge someone else for what they're doing. So, like, the people that protest out in front of Planned Parenthood, there's a whole type of different strategies in which people are attempting to lovingly intervene with women that are about to murder their children. And people disagree with the manner, disagree with the language. And I'm like, you know what? There's a time and place for that. But I have to measure it based upon what I'm doing. So when I put myself in that place that I'm going to go out there and try to love upon these people, I'm going to do it in a way that I feel is honoring to myself, honoring to the authority, and honoring to those people in the Planned Parenthood, and honoring, loving to those people that are approaching that place. So my approach is probably a little bit different. And I believe that I want to be consistent and sincere with my intentions. So prior to me ever getting out of my car and walking in front on the sidewalk, with or without signs, I don't use signs. But prior to me even getting in my car to drive to a destination, I'm going to send a letter to all of those in authority that may have authority over what's going on. I'm going to send a letter to Planned Parenthood. I'm going to send a letter to the mayor, the town council, the chief of police. I'm going to send a letter to the district attorney and the public defender's office. And I'm just going to say, hi, I just want to bring to your attention that I am going to be visiting this particular location. I'm going to be a law-abiding citizen. I'm going to use amplification device that is in accordance with our state statute and our local sound ordinances, and I will have the necessary meter to verify that I'm going to be in compliance with the law and how I use my voice. I will refrain from using any profanity, because profanity is not part of, and my message is going to be out there to love upon people and provide them with alternate resources. I have no desire to incite, inflate, conflate. I don't want to cause a disturbance. However, I cannot be responsible for the actions or response or reaction of those people that may be offended or their feelings hurt based upon how I do say when I will be on the sidewalk. I will be respectful to law enforcement, but I'm going to be a law-abiding citizen. I am going to be adhering to the Constitution, and I write this nice letter out that I send out to these people proactively. Prior to going out, I have a notebook, and in that notebook are the civil codes, the statutes, my constitutional rights, the law on Terry v. Ohio, and my freedom of speech and case law. I'm going to have a GIS survey which differentiates what is public and private property, and I am going to lawfully and respectfully assert my rights. Now, inevitably, without fail, that piece of communication is pretty much ignored. It's not filtered through the district attorney's office. It's not filtered through the chain of command inside of law enforcement. It's pretty much ignored. But I have a copy that email was sent. I have a copy of a registered letter that's sent with signature receipt, and it's in my notebook. I will go out prepared. I will have the survey information to show where I can lawfully stand, and I will have a record of everything that I say in every one of my encounters. I am often confronted by citizens who are going to be offended by what I say and how I say it because they have a particular belief. And I have a way in which I am willing to engage with people. And I am willing to engage with reasonable people. With unreasonable people, I am not going to engage. And I do that out of respect and out of love. I recently posted up on my Cultural Contrarian page that I said there's one rule that I operate from which I want to engage in reasonable discussion. And the word reasonable is very foundational. I don't assume anyone to be reasonable. I don't come from that assumption because I know from myself that my emotions can cloud my ability to be reasonable. That my passions, my convictions, my presuppositions, my ideology, that all of that combines into some emotional passion, and it can be emphasized and supported by my language and my facial expressions, and that emotion can percolate through. It's very difficult to shut off your emotions. And I admit that my emotions can put me in a place where I am perceived or I can actually be unreasonable. And I approach people that want to engage me and say, listen, let me just say something before we get amped up here. I give you that you are very passionate and you're very convicted and that you want to be vocally expressing your emotions regarding this particular topic. And I also am very passionate and convicted and am taking action on my belief structure on this particular topic. And I welcome the opportunity to have a reasonable conversation with you. If one, our discussion is based upon getting to know truth. That's the first if. If our destination is to tease out what is true, and I give you all of this emotion, you give me all of this emotion, and we can acknowledge that emotion can cloud our ability to reason based upon the goal of obtaining truth. I want you to hold me accountable to my emotions and my convictions if we're going to have a reasoned discussion, and I want you to give me the authority to help you govern your emotions as we attempt to reason on a quest for truth. Now, unfortunately, that takes about 3 to 4 minutes for me to have a conversation with someone for us both to come to an understanding. And that when emotions come into play, that we can hold each other accountable and say, I understand this is maybe emotionally involved for you. Can we hit the pause button, just kind of take a breath and calm down, because we acknowledge we both want to have a reasoned discussion to get to truth. So that's the way I interact with people in public. And if we cannot agree to be reasonable, I go, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But I'm not going to engage an unreasonable person. I'm going to get distance from an unreasonable person. I'm going to walk away from an unreasonable person. And if that person takes an action against me to follow me, to prevent me, that person's not being reasonable. I am removing myself from the conflict. So this takes it to another level. So I have a way to deal with private citizens in public. But there's a different challenge when you're dealing with those in law enforcement when in public. They may come on behalf of somebody's emotional response. And I will often encounter one police officer, and I have to make a determination, is this officer going to be reasonable or unreasonable? They generally start out reasonable until they are not able to get from me the things that they want. What they want is inconsequential to me as long as I'm a law-abiding citizen. They may want to know my name, my address, my date of birth. They may want to know this personally identifiable information about me. They may want to know what my intentions are. But as a law-abiding citizen with a notebook, I am there for business. And my business is proclamation to save women from a decision which I think is going to affect them for the rest of their lives in trying to terminate their own child. So I am in the matter of conducting business. And if my business happens to be on a public sidewalk, as long as I am not impeding traffic or causing a disturbance, my words cannot, unless they're fighting words, cannot be the source for causing a disturbance. So I've already notified the chain of command and the law enforcement and the district attorney that I'm going to be a law-abiding citizen. You may disagree with the way I appear in my chosen language, but I'm not going to do things that are provocative. I'm going to be things that are conscience-piercing. So the officer may be called for service to find out that there's this guy out there that's causing a disturbance because people's feelings are being hurt because he's talking about saving babies. And that officer may want to shut my voice down, but he doesn't have the lawful ability to do so. He has the unlawful power that he can do things unlawfully to silence me. He has implements of harm. He has the power of threats, intimidation, coercion, assault, kidnapping, conspiracy. He has all of these tools in his disposal that have been bestowed upon him that he can take access to that inventory of tools to oppress me as a citizen and put me inside of a court of secrets where I have to defend myself. And I am aware of the disparity of the relationship between a law enforcement and a private citizen. I know what that is. I have to be educated. I don't need to profess my education on this. I need to be respectful, need to be cordial, and I need to provide the ability for an officer to be educated. I cannot assume an officer to be reasonable, and I have no expectation or obligation that I can assign him that he should know the law. So I'm not going to make a declaration as, I know my rights, and you're trampling my rights. I'm going to be respectful and say, officer, I appreciate what you do, sir. I'm here in a public area asserting my rights in trying to rescue women and children. Now, you may disagree with how or what I am doing, but I am doing these under the freedoms and liberties that are afforded to me inside of the state. I have not broken any law. I have not broken any statute. And I have this book available to you to provide you clarity into what I'm doing. Am I detained or am I free to go? And an officer will often not answer that question because he is there for call for service, and his policy requires him to take certain steps on a call for service to identify me. And he's going to say, well, you're detained for investigative purposes. And I'm like, that's fine, officer. That's an unlawful detention, but don't understand, I will not resist, but I'm not going to comply with an unlawful detention. If you want to understand what I am doing, I'm not going to communicate with you. I'm going to remain silent. However, I have this book available to you. If you want to do real investigation, here is a book that gives you explanation as to what I'm doing. I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing while you can. I'm not going to move. I'm going to stay right here. I'm going to interact based upon my freedoms to do that. But if you want to investigate, I'm the only aid that I'm going to offer you in your investigation is my notebook. Have a good day, sir. And he will choose to try to continue me having a conversation with him. And I will continue to get distance. I'll say, sir, you have unlawfully detained me. I have no obligation to speak with you. I'm going to speak over here. I'm not addressing you anymore. Continue on your investigation. Now, oftentimes, they will ratchet that up because they don't like that I am exercising my rights and not being obedient or submissive or compliant with their perception of their role in society as authority. And they will take steps against me, and that they will go hands-on. They'll put their little vinyl gloves on and they will restrain me. Well, that's fine. You are now perpetrating assault on me because I have not done anything unlawful. You haven't told me I've done anything unlawful. You're just detaining me for suspicious. Somebody is making a comment, the majority fear them. It is a very fearful encounter. When you are confronted with authority, with people that can do some horrendous things to you, you are going to be triggered into post-traumatic stress. That's going to happen. Your blood is going to race, you're nervous, your legs are going to shake, and they're going to say, why are you shaking? I'll say, officer, this is a natural physiological response in the face of a predator equipped with implements to cause me harm and the power and the authority to do so. So to say that I shouldn't be in a fight or flight is ridiculous. Any psychologist would tell you that it is reasonable when confronted with a gun at your head to have this fight or flight instinct. So yes, it's legitimate to be fearful, but I need to power through that fear. We need to power through that fear. See, I'm going to point out, somebody made a comment, but that there are two of the major causes of post-traumatic stress symptomology. Well, for veterans, it's fireworks. When fireworks go off, it triggers PTSD for veterans because they've had that, what used to be called during World War II, shell-shocked. For private citizens, it's that red and blue light that goes off. It triggers a sense of fight or flight. And you don't want to have that encounter because you know that officers have this power that they can do things to you financially and they can incarcerate you. And they just say, I'm making the decision, let the courts. We'll see you in court. We'll see you in court. But people that are educated, equipped, and empowered can lawfully stand in the face of that authority. They may not win in that moment, But if they're a law-abiding citizen, they have a power to them to level the playing field. The court of law, when you exercise the law, is the great equalizer. However, in order to achieve parity, equivalency between authority and ourselves, the burden is much higher for us. We have a much greater burden. Now, unfortunately, citizens don't understand that burden. They don't spend any time in understanding what's the difference between the authority of law enforcement and the authority of private citizens as it relates to the law when they get inside the court of secrets. They don't understand it because there's an interpretive entity there, and that is someone in the bar. And the bar is your gateway into this discussion inside the court of secrets. But I know that spokesperson for me on the defendant's side, I need to give them as much evidence that they will be successful when negotiating and arguing against the plaintiff, the state, the law enforcement. So in this encounter that I was walking through, my notebook is the equalizer. The standard for law enforcement is a reasonableness standard. What a reasonable officer should be expected to do in the same circumstances. They do not have an obligation to know the laws, because ignorance of the law is not a defense of the law, only applies to private citizens. It doesn't apply to law enforcement. So I need to prove, Van, how are you doing? I need to prove that an officer is making a cognitive decision to be unreasonable. And once I pierce through that, then I've taken the officer under and showed them to act under the color of law, act unlawfully, and now I strip their qualified immunity. Because when an officer has been found to be unreasonable, they have taken off that badge and they're violating the oath that they have served, and they're acting in their private capacity with the perception of this authority. Very difficult concept. This is not something that I'm going to articulate or educate an officer to understand that I know these differences. I know my rights. I don't need to say that. I need to act in accordance with that knowledge. My notebook is that act in accordance with that knowledge. Officer, I don't have an obligation to speak to you. I appreciate that you're doing an investigation. I respect your authority. Please do not misinterpret my non-compliance as resistance. I will not resist your unlawful acts. You can violate me 9 ways to Sunday, and you get out of jail free card on it. But I'm telling you, if you're going to conduct an investigation and you have an expectation of me to support your investigation to incriminate me, I'm going to be silent. However, I'm willing to assist you. And I'm going to give you this notebook, which says what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, what authority I have to do it, what laws I am complying with. And I'm also going to make notice that if you have another officer come here and attempt to perpetrate a conspiracy against me, I put them on notice that all camera footage that is being documented by you, I will need for archival reasons, and you are put on notice that you are not allowed to destroy a public record. All of this is in my notebook, that I don't need to say a word, and they can tab through for their investigation, and I don't care how long they want to conduct their investigation. I will occasionally pulse them. Am I free to go, or am I still unlawfully detained? Am I free to go, or am I still unlawfully detained? They don't have a lawful reason. An investigative stop is not a lawful detention absent of articulable facts that a crime has occurred, a crime is in progress, or a crime is about to occur. They won't say those things, but I'm going to continue to show that they're not being reasonable on my record, on my video record. So when they put me in handcuffs, they put me into a car in an attempt to kidnap me, I'm going to telegraph their steps. I'm saying, officer, I'm not resisting you. My hands are behind my back. My fingers are interlocked, and I am not resisting. My muscles are not tense. I'm going limp. I understand that you are putting these bracelets of restraint and you are arresting me. No, I'm detaining you. No, this is an arrest. My movement has been arrested. I cannot move. While you want to call it detainment for your officer's safety, what you have actually done is you have physically arrested my ability of movement. Now you are moving me into a vehicle, which is attempted kidnapping at this point, because I am not doing this consensually. You are attempting to kidnap me. And if you put this car in motion, this is the act of active kidnapping. Van made a comment that they may not be teaching the Constitution in the Academy anymore. There's a very brief section in the Academy about the Constitution, but it's what happens is they provide the education on what the Constitution says. They don't correlate that on how people will act in accordance with it in society, but they really talk about what their authority is in honoring their chain of command and the policy. So unfortunately, there's a pretty big disconnect. Hey, Joey, how are you doing? There's a disconnect that exists between the citizens. And we do not understand the incentive, the structure, the motivation to law enforcement. We don't understand the duties that they're discharged. How many people have gone and done a public records quest and downloaded the policies of what your law enforcement are supposed to do? Here are the guide marks. Nobody's done that. We have an apathetic, ignorant society based upon an education which has been from indoctrination coming from TV. Somebody made a comment, and I'll address it. Somebody said capitalist democracy is inherently flawed. And I will say organizational structures under the authority of man will always be flawed. When you allow man to control things and you distance its relationship from God, you perpetuate the growth of the flaw, the brokenness, the sin. So we basically had 10 rules on how to live in a society without hurting ourselves and without hurting others. But now we have over 17,000 because we can't abide by the 10. And that is all foundational to the depravity of man. So a system is a byproduct of the man. But I would say of all of the world organizations of man under authority, we are kind of privileged to live in the one that we are in the United States. As broken as it is, and it is absolutely flawed and broken, but we have power, what we have choose not to assert that power. Degeneracy is a human condition. Degeneracy is depravity, and it is part of our human DNA. It's inescapable. And the entity of the government is a way to put restraints on the depths of depravity. The system is depraved itself, as with the humanity. I mean, I don't expect a politician or an officer to behave any better than I do. I know what goes on in my head. I have a better degree of restraint, but I don't expect others to have a similar degree of restraint. But I'm going off topic. So, as a person, I have a desire to acquire self-knowledge. And that, very good, Van. I don't think it's a human issue. Most humans are not depraved. Ludwig, I would disagree with you, because I believe in a moral objective standard, and I can point to a moral objective standard, and what one would perceive you postulating is that depravity is a word. I say there are multiple symptoms of depravity. degrees of depravity, and it is inherent in all humans. Now, that's absent of a standard. That I totally disagree with that, but that's a conversation for another day, because either you tell me a standard for good. Tell me what your standard for good is. I apologize. I'm going off the rails for a second. Ludwig, what is your standard for something being good or bad? Give me a moral objective standard of good. Where does it come from? And here's where we may get confused. Because absent of that standard, you have no basis of determining something good. Tell me what nature's law. If you're going to assert nature's law, then I'm going to assume you're going to claim it has to do with Darwin and evolution and survival of the fittest. And if that is your source for nature's law is neo-Darwinianism and survival of the fittest, then there is nothing bad in survival. In order for me to survive, there can be nothing which is defined as bad. So what is nature's law? If you're going to assert nature's law for defining good, is it survival of the fittest? Because in order for me to survive and feed my family, where does good come in from a law standpoint? But anyway, this is where you can get into philosophical conversations. I understand you can't explain it in text, and that's why I afford people the ability to have conversations with me outside of Periscope. This is a lecture, and people can bring this stuff in. But unfortunately, I take these kind of topics and I say, come on screen and have a conversation and make your point, make your case. And I come from the position that we both can't be right. One of us has to be wrong. We both can't be right. We're depraved or we're not. But that's okay. That's another conversation. So I come equipped when I go on the sidewalk with the resources to stand on my liberty and freedom as a law-abiding citizen. And I don't expect an officer or law enforcement or authority to be reasonable. And I need, in order to be consistent, with who I am, and knowing that I will wind up inside the court of secrets and need to abide by the rules and process and procedures inside that court of secrets, that I need to make my best efforts in presenting my objective record. Now, I made a post that I have been arrested. My life has been handcuffed. I've been kidnapped. I have been unlawfully charged with crimes that did not happen. And I have not provided my ID. I have been brought before a magistrate demanding that I provide ID. I do not carry my ID when I'm a law-abiding citizen. There's no reason to. But I will be brought before the magistrate. The officer will make his case. And I will let the officer make whatever case he wants to say. And I will say, Your Honor, what I have just listened to was pretty much a narrative from the officer, which contradicts the objective record that I have. I have an objective record of me being a law-abiding citizen, not doing anything criminal. I remained silent, and I provided information for an officer to conduct an investigation where he did not conduct an investigation. I had all of the information as to what I was doing, and I have it on my person. Actually, the officer took it from me. He seized my property. And that seizure was me providing him reasonable efforts for him to support an investigation to determine what I was doing. And the judge says, you seized this man's property, and I say, it was absent of a warrant, Your Honor. He confiscated material. He stole my material absent of a warrant. I request that you view this material prior to demanding me unlawfully to provide my identification. Now, you can be an unreasonable judge. That's totally fine, Your Honor. You can be unreasonable, but I am trying to be a reasonable person here, that I provided reasonable information to the officer as to what I was doing. They chose to ignore it. You can follow that line as well if you would like. But I'm going to record with the court clerk that you are now being unreasonable to support this officer. Now, in all cases, in all circumstances, when it has gotten to that point, the very first thing behind a hidden folder is some identifying information, some preliminary identifying information. But I'm saying, by you going into this, you violated my Fourth Amendment right to be safe, secure in my papers, properties, and effects. You violated my Fourth Amendment right, but that information is available to you, and if you choose to do that absent of a warrant, without being reasonable, that's on you. I'm telegraphing that you're violating my rights. I'm telegraphing you infringed my First Amendment rights. I am telegraphing that you have committed a conspiracy, and you are also part of that conspiracy. But it's all documented in this notebook. And it's up to you as to how much time you want to be reasonable to do your investigation. But in all instances, when the judge has gotten that notebook, he's like, you guys have stepped in it. Officer, you have stepped in it. Sergeant, you have stepped in it. You are putting this before me, and this dude is prepared, and he did nothing wrong. Return him to where he was and leave him alone. You must transport him back, release him, and you must remove any piece of communication that you have about this, any charges. There is the first cause is gone. You act outside the rule of law, under color of law. This guy's got a lawsuit that's coming after you, Mr. Officer. And I am not going to be party to that lawsuit, because he's going to put me party to this lawsuit if I keep going here. So this guy, get him out of my courtroom. I don't want to know who he was. Get him out of my courtroom. Now, the officers are in the contempt of cop is flaring with them because they aren't able to charge me with a crime. That conspiracy has been put to bed. That they cannot act violently against me and incarcerate me and charge me with false, bogus charges. They can't get me for causing a disturbance. They can't get me for loitering. They can't get me for trespassing. They can't get me for impeding an investigation. They can't get me for any of this. And it is up to me to make a decision if I want to be reasonable with the unreasonable person. So when this all comes to a head, and I am being transported back to my car, and the officer is he's got shame. I said, officer, I'm a law-abiding citizen. It was my preference that it didn't go this way. I had given you every opportunity for this not to go this way. And for whatever reason, you chose to not do these things. And this is very uncomfortable for you. And that's unfortunate. That's very unfortunate. So the law works for both of us, sir. The law works for both of us. I do not desire to personally harm you in the way that you attempted to personally harm me. I don't want to seek retribution and take your TV and take your jet ski and take your car away from you for how you violated me several times. This may look good inside your squad room. This may look good among the blue line that you are camaraderie that, look, I was able to take this guy off the street, put him in handcuffs, put him in the car, and to take him to, now I got to take him back. That's a lot of crow to eat. And I can take that crow and I can shove it further down your throat, but that's not my intention. I had all along wanted to be reasonable, but you had demonstrated that you did not want to be reasonable. Now, I want to stop this from happening again. So I want to be on the side of respecting and appreciating your role and duty and responsibility within authority lawfully. And I want to make myself available to speak to you and your peers and your leadership on how you deal with law-abiding citizens to restore the disconnect. And I would like to have that be a reasonable conversation, because all of my communication had attempted that in advance, and I was pretty much ignored. I had sent all of this communication, which is in my book, to let you know that I was doing this. And everybody just said, we got the authority. We don't need to listen or care, or we can squish you. You can squish me. But I have remedy. I have a remedy. I would like to take this in a different direction, and that's your option. It's up to you as to how you want to escalate or de-escalate this. And you are in control of this decision. So, in the domain of the First Amendment auditors, I am not a YouTube star. I have no desire to be a YouTube star. I'm not there for YouTube purposes. I'm here for community purposes, for people's benefit, for private citizen benefit. I don't need the celebrity. I don't need to stand up and say, I know my rights. I know the law. Look at poster 7 at the public. I don't need to do that. I don't need to do a live stream as I'm going through and having these encounters, or when I'm standing on the sidewalk and doing whatever I do. I don't need that celebrity, because I want to act locally to facilitate change, for it to build. I don't need the YouTube visibility, nor do I desire it. But I think it's beneficial to those that are immersed in this social media fugue of nonsense to get broader perspectives. There are some great channels out there like Audit the Audit that they speak into analyzing what the law is and how people are conducting themselves in the face of the law. And they provide the law's kind of response. I think those are valuable. But the Joe Schmo with the camera that's instigating and conflating and stepping into that for personal, their agenda is quite transparent. You can tease out what they're doing. You can tease out what these guys are doing. And I mean, there's some great people out there, and I think they would benefit from having the iron sharpen the iron, to allow people to have some transparency, to be held accountable. Because if our quest is truth, and our quest is restoring relationships, we would benefit from outsider feedback and participation on how others are doing it. I have benefited from all of these people on how they do it, to differentiate myself in that. That's not the way that I want to do it. I appreciate this law enforcement in our society. I understand the benefits of our structure. As flawed as it is, I understand my place in it and the rights that are afforded to me. And I need to navigate that respectfully, professionally. But I need to do it also in a belligerent kind of way. That I do not need to accept the abuse, the tyranny, the oppression. That's just me. I understand the fight or flight gets in there, and I need to control my emotions and physical responses in the threat of that violence. And I also have the ability to make a decision that in this moment, I sense this guy is not safe, and I need to say, whoa, I'm out of here. I am out of here. This guy is not mentally stable, and that if I try to assert myself, he will say something to legitimize him in his mind to take actions against me, which could end my life. And I understand that. So I need to understand that I don't want to do this with my wife and daughter. I don't want to do this in front of other people to a certain degree when I encounter that unstable person. Requires a tremendous amount of discernment. Okay. I'm going to end this. I'm going to put it up on my YouTube channel for those people that may find me through comments and want to see what I do or hear what I do. I do not put my encounters up on YouTube, because most of my encounters are involved in some legal process, and that they're not meant for public consumption, because they're done for educational purposes. I don't have the ability to take that private information and put it into the public domain without it being, holy smokes. Did it once. Not pleasant. Not pleasant. Social media is a fickle monster. Don't need that. Homie, don't play that. Everybody have a great day, and I will be sharing this up on the YouTube channel. I'm going to put it up on my Facebook page as well for those people that may have interest. Take care, everybody.